Hey, good evening. This is the February 26th meeting of the San Francisco County Transportation Authority Community Advisory Committee, or CAC. I'm Kat Siegel, chair of the CAC. Our vice chair is Naj Daniels. I'd like to thank our clerk, Amy Sayung, and our operator, Brittany Chan, for this meeting. Madam Clerk, please do a roll call to ensure we have quorum, and then I believe you have an announcement about public comment.
CAC members, when I call your name, please say present to ensure a quorum. Member Bars? Bars present. Vice Chair Daniels? Daniels absent. Member Ford? Ford absent. Member Kim?
Kim's here.
Kim present. Member Levine? Levine present. Member Margarita? Margarita absent. Member Milford Rosales?
Milford Rosales present.
Milford Rosales present. Member Ng?
Ng present.
Ng present. Member Ortega?
Ortega present.
Ortega present. Chair Siegel?
Siegel present.
Siegel present. Chair, we have quorum. Also, my public announcement. Public comment will be available for each item on this agenda via telephone by calling one of the numbers listed on the front of the agenda or by joining the meeting through the Zoom link. Once you join, you will be able to listen to the meeting as a participant. To make public comment on an item, when the item is called, members of the public participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the raise hand feature or dial *9. Do not press *9 again, or you will be removed from the queue. When you are asked to unmute yourself, press *6 or the unmute button to unmute yourself. The live operator will advise you that you are allowed 2 minutes to speak. When your 2 minutes are up, we will move on to the next caller. Best practices are to speak slowly, clearly, and turn down the volume of any televisions or radios around you. Thank you. That concludes my announcement.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That puts us on item number 2. This is the chair's report, and this is an information item. Welcome back to Jerry Levine, who has been reappointed to serve as the CAC District 2 representative. Thank you to Amy Sayung, who has shared copies of the Executive Director's report from yesterday's board meeting with CAC members. It is available on the agency website at sfcta.org/events. At yesterday's board meeting, there was a presentation on a voter survey commissioned by the Metropolitan Transportation Commission related to a regional transportation measure, which is also on our agenda under item 9 tonight. The board also received an update from newly appointed SFMTA Director of Transportation, Julie Kirschbaum, on SFMTA's financial outlook. I understand from staff that we will have SFMTA back to present in the next month or two following the conclusion of the Muni Funding Working Group, so the CAC can weigh in on recommendations to close Muni's projected funding deficits, both revenue and non-revenue strategies. Lastly, please note, while today's agenda may look short, I am trying to save a good 20 minutes at the end of the meeting for our ethics training. Meeting management notes. CAC members, please be sure to speak directly into the microphone so folks in the back of the room can hear you, and please try to limit your questions to a max of 2 questions per agenda item. Presenters, CAC members and folks in the hearing room, please turn off or silence all electronic devices and computer notifications during the meeting. That's it for announcements. Are there any questions or comments from CAC members on the chair's report? Not seeing any. Is there anyone in the hearing room wishing to give public comment on the chair's report? Seeing anyone? Operator, is there any remote public comment on the chair's report?
There is no remote public comment.
Great. Thank you so much. Then that puts us on items 3 through 6, which comprise the consent agenda. Staff is not planning to present, but is available to answer questions. Do any CAC members have any questions or comments on the consent agenda? Not seeing any. Is there anyone in the hearing room wishing to give public comment on the consent agenda? Operator, is there any remote public comment?
There is no public comment.
Great. May I have a motion and a second to approve items 3, 4, and 5 on the consent agenda? Moved by Member Milford Rosales,
Motion to approve?
seconded by Member Ortega. Madam Clerk, would you please take a roll call vote?
On the motion to approve items 3, 4, and 5 on the consent agenda, Member Bars?
Bars, aye.
Bars, aye. Vice Chair Daniels? Daniels absent. Member Ford? Ford absent. Member Kim?
Kim, aye.
Kim, aye. Member Levine? Levine, aye. Member Margarita? Margarita absent. Member Milford Rosales?
Milford Rosales, aye.
Milford Rosales, aye. Member Ng?
Ing, aye.
Ng, aye. Member Ortega?
Ortega, aye.
Ortega, aye. Chair Siegel?
Siegel, aye.
Siegel, aye. There are 7 ayes. The consent agenda is approved.
Great, thank you so much. That puts us on item 7, adopt a motion of support to amend the 2023 Prop L 5-year prioritization program for muni maintenance, rehabilitation, and replacement. And this is an action item. Nick Smith, Senior Transportation Planner, is here with us to present the 5YPP amendment, followed by SFMTA's Bhavin Khatri, Zero Emission Program Manager, who will speak to some of the questions that Member Milford Rosales and myself asked about SFMTA's plans for trolley coaches at a prior CAC meeting. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you. Good evening. I will be presenting the proposed amendment to the 5YPP for the Muni Maintenance, Rehabilitation, and Replacement Program. As a reminder for continuing CAC members and new members, the Prop L expenditure plan requires development and board approval of 5-year prioritization plans, or 5YPPs, as a prerequisite to allocation of funds from a given Prop L program, along with adoption of the Prop L strategic plan. The 5YPPs include a 5-year list of projects with associated sales tax funding commitments that support a pipeline of projects be funded over the next 5 years. 5YPPs allow sponsors to plan ahead which facilitates their ability to secure other funds to leverage Prop L and fully fund projects and line up staff and resources to deliver projects. When projects are ready to advance, the project sponsor can request allocation of funds from the board based on the programming commitment in the 5YPP. This slide outlines the sections in every 5YPP document. The 5YPP amendment for consideration today is presented as an enclosure to this item. The 5YPPs include information on scope, schedule, cost, and funding plans for each project, including as well as project prioritization methodology to rank projects, and other elements like summary of public feedback and project delivery report. As a reminder, the board adopted prioritization criteria for each program that guide the development of our recommendations. Some criteria are across the whole of the of Prop L, and some are tailored to each specific. Muni maintenance is by far the largest program in Prop L. Projects are part of a large and complex capital improvement program for vehicles, facilities, and guideways, where MTA is maintaining its assets in a state of good repair and coordinating project sequencing for facility modernization and upgrades. 5YPP approved in 2023 program funds to projects with time-sensitive funding needs and placeholders for fiscal years 25 through 28 to give us time to work with MTA to refine project priorities and strengthen funding plans. We've worked with MTA over the past several months on the proposed 5-way PP amendment to reprogram $46.9 million in placeholder Prop L funds to 9 specific projects, and also to update the programming cash flows for 3 existing projects in the 5-way PP as approved in 2023. The 5-way PP approved in 2023 program funds for projects in fiscal 24, including procurement of hybrids and battery electric vehicles to replace vehicles that have reached the end of their useful lives, and facility upgrades. We have allocated Prop L funds for all these projects except the Muni Metro Station's condition assessment, which SFMTA is requesting for allocation as a separate item on this agenda. And as well, it included 2 fund exchanges between the midlife overhaul project and a housing incentive pool grant placeholder and the portal project. The proposed 5-way PP amendment both programs new projects and makes changes to existing projects. Those changes are as follows. It delays $18.3 million in that HIP fund placeholder by 1 year to better reflect the HIP project's schedules and funding needs. It reduces the amount programmed to the Wood-Isleas Creek electrification to reflect the amount of funds actually allocated in 2024, and it increases the amount programmed to Muni Metro Station's assessment by utilizing those funds that were not needed by the Wood-Isleas Creek electrification, and those funds are to cover cost increases as discussed in the next slide. So this station condition assessment project will complete an assessment of this condition of 9 Muni Metro subway stations from Embarcadero to West Portal to address deferred subway station maintenance issues. The assessment will be used for the development of specific maintenance campaigns and capital improvement projects. And this request is in addition to the existing $750,000 programmed in December of 2023. After initiating an RFP in 2022 and after discussions with consulting firms, SFMTA increased the contract cost estimate from $460,000 to $1.3 million, which together with $200,000 for MTA project management has resulted in a total cost of $1.5 million for the full subway study scope. And allocation of this $1.5 million is a separate item on this agenda. Biggest single program in Prop K was for vehicle procurement and maintenance. The sales tax is a key local match to funding replacement of Muni's entire rubber tire fleet and LRVs. And SFCTA requires that Muni maintain a state of good repair on these vehicles by conducting overhauls. These overhauls significantly improve vehicle reliability, help reduce breakdowns, and prevent service interruptions and additional costly repairs, and enable the vehicles to meet their useful life. And there are 3 overhauls in this amendment, and I will just quickly flip through the 3 that are listed there on the right. So it's the El Dorado Motor Coach midlife overhauls, the New Flyer midlife overhauls phase 2, and then the LRV quarter life overhauls, the first phase of that. So then, getting into the next project, which is another overhaul, but not for vehicles that were procured with Prop K. This is the New Jersey PCC streetcar midlife overhaul, which will conduct life cycle refresh repairs on 16 historic streetcars. PCC stands for President's Conference Committee, the group that designed the streetcars in the 30s. Improvements include bodywork repairs to mitigate rust and corrosion, door system upgrades, propulsion control upgrades, comprehensive truck rebuilds, and upgrades to auxiliary electric power supplies. This work will be completed over 10 years And at present, the funding plan has a significant $22.2 million gap in the construction phase. When MTA is ready to request allocation of construction funds per Prop L policy, SFCTA will expect a fully funded phase or subphase with appropriate leveraging. Next, we have Cable Car Restoration Project, which is a comprehensive program focused on the preservation, restoration, and maintenance of the historic cable car fleet operated by MTA, with a total of 42 cable cars in operation today. Each restoration will take approximately 18 months to complete by a team of highly skilled artisans. Key components of the restoration include carpentry and metalwork to restore and reinforce the car bodies, manufacturing new parts, repainting, mechanical overhauls of propulsion and braking systems, and preventative maintenance. This is a placeholder for cable car restorations between fiscal 25 and 28. When MTA is ready to request allocation, the request for policy will show a fully funded phase or subphase with appropriate leverage. The paratransit vehicle replacement project will procure 72 replacement gasoline or electric paratransit vehicles as existing vehicles approach the end of their useful life. These modern vehicles will allow SFMTA to provide more reliable and comfortable paratransit service for people with disabilities that are unable to access a fixed route transit system. Type of vehicles purchased will be informed by the outcome of the electric vehicle pilot and rollout plan for paratransit vehicles. And prior to allocation of Prop L funds, SFMTA shall present to the board the results of the paratransit EV pilot that MTA is undertaking. Next, moving on from vehicles to the facilities, the group of facilities projects. The Cable Car Barn Rehabilitation Project will complete critical capital improvements to the historic cable car barn that will improve working conditions at the facility. The cable car barn and the cable car fleet it houses are each registered as historic landmarks. The building was originally built in 1888, but was severely damaged by the 1906 earthquake, and the most recent rehabilitation was more than 40 years ago. Conversion to a 12 kilovolt electrical power is the project's top priority. Additionally, the project will seismically retrofit the facility, replace a crane and elevators, improve accessibility, and repair the building's roof and exterior. And this request will fund environmental clearance for that full project scope and the design of just those critical upgrades to the 12 kilovolt electric power system. Next, in the facilities projects is the Kirkland Yard Electrification Project, which will renovate and upgrade the Kirkland Bus Maintenance Facility and Yard to support the deployment of about 110 40-foot battery electric buses by early 2029. This project will help San Francisco meet the California Air Resource Board, or CARB's innovative clean transit requirement to operate 100% zero-emission buses by 2040 and the procurement requirements. This request will fund SFMTA staff labor to supplement PG&E design engineering for the electrical distribution infrastructure from the PG&E power substation to the Kirkland Yard, which is required for either a full or phased conversion of this yard. SFMTA's schedule reflects a progressive design build approach and contract advertised by December 2025 to meet the 2029 timeline. This would require a significant lift on the funding side to secure $92.8 million in TBD plan funds in that time frame. We will continue to work with SFMTA to better understand and refine the funding plan. So that was the list of projects, and this last slide illustrates the iterative process we go through every 5 years to identify the projects that will receive Prop L funding in the next 5 years in the strategic plan. The step one, the strategic plan baseline was approved in 2023. Step two involved working with sponsors to identify the specific projects to fund in the next 5 years. Between July 2023 and July 2024, the board adopted the 5 YPPs and 5-year project lists and allow sponsors to request advancing funds to support delivery faster than simply spending revenues as they came in. We are now in the final step 3. The final step will be adoption of the final Prop L strategic plan, which is expected next month. The final strategic plan reflects lower annual cash flows compared to the approved community maintenance 5 YPP and strategic plan baseline as amended. This will not result in increased finance costs for this program. With that, we are happy to take questions and also have SFMTA staff to answer questions as well.
Great, thank you so much for the presentation. Should we take the trolley bus presentation at the same time, or?
It's really up to you, Chair Siegel. You can take public comment once at the end, or you can choose to do it twice.
If there are no objections, I think it would make sense to hear them together since they complement each other, if that's okay. Thank you.
Good evening, Bob Incatry, Zero Emission Program Manager for SFMTA. I'm here to mostly talk about trolleys, but I'll give you a brief overview of our electrification plan and what we've learned in our transition pilot program. So we have conducted a pilot program where we purchased buses from several manufacturers and ran them side by side. That report is actually available on our website now, the evaluation report. And what we found is that we should definitely procure buses from multiple manufacturers as opposed to procuring buses from just manufacturer. That helps with the competition as well as better pricing that we can acquire. What we learned is currently there are only 2 viable manufacturers in North America, New Flyer and Gillig. For context, our entire fleet right now, for the most part, is New Flyer. Gillig is actually a local Bay Area manufacturer. That's a very large manufacturer. They're out of Livermore. We are working with them to procure buses from them as well. They did not originally participate in the pilot program, but now they're open to doing business with us. And then Solaris is a European manufacturer that is looking to establish their presence in North America, and we're very interested in doing business with them because they also manufacture trolley buses in Europe. Some of the lessons learned from our pilot program, and I think this was one of the questions that I'd put forward, is how we're going to deal with the battery electric buses and resiliencies. Well, the role of battery electric buses is really unknown at this time, but there are ways to mitigate that by either having an on-site battery storage or solar power or getting feed from 2 different utility feed, backup generator, things of that nature. So our plan is to, when we transition our facility to accommodate battery electric buses, we'll use a variety of these techniques to mitigate the resiliency. And then we're also working with, APTA's bus manufacturing task force to sort of learn about what's the best way to mitigate the resiliency risk for battery electric buses and all buses in general. One of the lessons that we've learned while we were doing this pilot program is that our workforce is already trained to work on battery electric buses because we work on hybrid buses, which are very similar to battery electric buses. If you remove the engine and add batteries, then they becomes essentially battery electric buses. Now, we currently have our hybrid mechanics are working on battery electric buses, and we're also going to be expanding because there's going to be overhead charging infrastructure, and the local 6 would be working on the overhead charging infrastructure as they have the capability and technical expertise to work on the charging infrastructure. The other lessons learned we have is that we necessarily don't need like biggest battery packs that's available on our battery buses because San Francisco is 7 square miles, so we're able to meet the daily needs of 150, 160 miles with a single charge. We think that the battery electric buses would be the preferred technology to replace the hybrid buses. But we are open to, other zero-emission technology as well, fuel cell included. This is our sort of upcoming battery electric bus procurement. So we received a grant from FTA to install 18 bus charging infrastructure at a couple of our sites. So we are buying 18 battery electric buses, and we're going to split that order between New Flyer, which did very well in the pilot program, Gillig, who's a local supplier, and then Solaris, who's a European manufacturer that manufactures trolley buses. So we think it's advantageous for us to build a relationship with them. Trolley bus future. So trolleys are an important part of SFMTA's zero-emission program. We've been operating them for a very, very long time. We like all trolley buses. We intend to keep it. So we really formed a consortium with all the trolley bus operators in North America to keep this technology alive, and I think we've made a lot of progress to sort of keep trolley buses relevant, including talking to the manufacturer to ensure that they continue to manufacture trolley buses. The other thing we're doing is, like I mentioned in my earlier slide, we are partnering with Solaris, who make trolley buses in Europe, and we're hoping that they would bring that technology here in North America so we have another supplier of trolley buses. IMC program stands for in-motion charging. That's when you travel off wire with poles not being attached for a distance. And we have a currently pilot that's going on 40-foot and 60-foot. But the original intent of that pilot program to validate an upgraded battery pack, because the existing battery pack on our current trolleys, the manufacturer is bankrupt, so that battery pack is not available. So that was our original intent. But of course, we want to know how the IMC coach operate in our environment as well. I think it's good to note that currently there's only one manufacturer of trolley buses, and the technical support and part supply is out of Europe for our existing trolley buses. It's hard to get the support and parts for our trolley buses. And when the manufacturer makes the trolley buses here, and they make them once every 15 years, well, not 15 years, but the trolley life is 15 years, and there's only about 700 buses in North America, so you can think of it as maybe 50 buses a year. So, they make it in batches every years or so, and then they kind of don't make it for several years. So they don't have that technical expertise as well here to help us maintain these. The buses, really, what we found is that, and just like with any new technology, this goes for battery electric buses. When we first introduced them, they did not do well as far as reliability is concerned. Same thing is going on with our IMC pilot program, but that's expected, and we're going to see improvement as the technology matures. We are currently working on a preliminary recommendation report that'll kind of give a guidance to our service planning team that, hey, you can run this off-wire for 4 miles or whatever miles, so that they can really plan on how we can best utilize this trolley bus. We are going to convert our existing buses to trolley, the IMC buses during the midlife because, like I said, the manufacturer of the battery is bankrupt, so we have to do this anyway, so we're going to do it. Consideration for trolley expansion. So, you know, we may be able to run IMC buses on some of our hybrid route that has partial overhead coverage, and we intend to do that. We are running our pilot buses right now with the expectation that we will be able to do that as well. But really, we need to do more analysis to understand the impact on overhead wire because IMC coaches pull a lot of current, a lot of juice power, so we want to make sure that we don't overload that substation that's providing that power. And we're really focused currently on ensuring that trolley buses are available in North America. And like I said, we're working with Solaris. We're hoping that New Flower will continue to make trolley buses. So we're really focused on that with partnership with other transit agency as well. Our trolley network and the infrastructure really needs a lot of work. I mean, it's still a good repair on those. That network should be prioritized before we really build out additional trolley network. And then there's also a consideration of connecting on the wire and off wire as we transition from on wire to off wire in the middle of San Francisco streets. Now, you might have seen those pans that we have that help with putting the poles up, but those work about 65% of the time. So most of the time they require the operator to get out of the bus. So we're also looking for a solution that's going to be much better and successful before we sort of implement this IMC trolley coaches. This chart kind of shows our procurement plan. So between now and 2040, when we are planning to sort of transition to zero emission fleet, we're going to continue to buy hybrid buses. We're going to buy trolley buses. And we're going to buy other zero-emission buses, such as battery electric buses, or we might even consider fuel cells. We have a facility framework plan, but it is really a snapshot in time. It's a living document. It's got a lot of variables. Obviously, we can't buy zero-emission buses without the infrastructure being in place. So we have that, but it's a living document. We'll continue to adopt and adapt to some of the lessons learned that we get as we deploy more buses. And this is last slide is just what our future fleet composition look like. We're kind of showing that by 2037 we may expand our fleet and what the final makeup could look like. Again, just because we said that it's 769 in the end, or BEB, what we really mean that the entire fleet will be zero emission by that time, with a combination of all types of zero emission technology. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Let's go to member comments or questions. Member Levine.
Informative. Just had a little curiosity about the New Jersey PCCs, and there are going to be 32 vehicles that will be rehabbed. Is that correct? And sorry, there looks like about 32 vehicles to be rehabbed that will run roughly $35 million. Is that right? I think that's what the presentation said. In any event, excuse me, just curious. so that's roughly a little over $2 million apiece. I'm just curious, is there? Oh, not working, huh? Oh, okay. How's that? How's that? So, since these are old vehicles, they're, you know, who knows? I have no idea how old they are, but did you have a plan in mind when you originally purchased them about when rehab might be necessary, or was it just it was kind of a as you go, you determined that at a certain point they were just ready?
I believe we have SFMTA staff on online to answer that.
Sorry, did someone, was that the PCC that you're referencing?
Yes, yes.
Oh, yeah, probably can.
If there is an SFMTA project manager able to respond, that'd be great. Otherwise, this is Anna LaForte, Deputy Director for Policy and Programming. Our understanding with the historic vehicles and also on the cable cars is that they're treated like an LRV's useful life, which is a 25-year useful life, and so they are referred to as what's the R word? I keep forgetting. It's a rehabilitation as opposed to an overhaul. I don't know why I have that mental block of what R stands for here, but so that is how they are treated as far as a useful life and when they would be due for an overhaul. So I would assume that they would be overdue.
And the roughly $2 million cost for each rehab, was that about what was anticipated, or it seems like a lot? But maybe I'm just not aware of what the cost might be at this point.
It is a major overhaul. It is a significant amount of work to preserve the historic features and nature of cable cars, and in this case, the 16 vehicles that are in the PCC. So it is an extensive amount of body work and paint and replacement of any rubber parts, et cetera.
Member Milford Rosales.
Thank you very much for the presentation. My questions are tied to the trolley bus status program. So looking through that, the last slide chart you shared, it shows a plan to reduce the size of the trolley bus fleet by about 12% over this current window. And both in that presentation and in the materials that I looked at here so far, I didn't really see any kind of alternatives analysis, cost-benefit analysis, et cetera, comparing BEBs and trolley buses, IMC buses included. I've had various conversations with folks in AC Transit that have talked extensively about how they're having to functionally reduce transit service because of the increased operating cost, maintenance cost, and fleet size requirements of transitioning to a battery bus fleet. And I'm curious if that has been factored in at all with the current plans to reduce the size of the trolley bus fleet by a meaningful percentage and replace it with battery buses, replace that portion with battery buses.
Yeah, the reduction in the trolley that you're seeing is that because we are consolidating trolley buses to one yard, which is our Potrero yard, which we're modernizing right now. So that's a 3-story facility that we're building, and we hope to operate all the trolley bus out of that facility. The final number is not sort of finalized yet, so we'll know exactly how many buses we'll be able to store in that facility. So we're kind of showing that as a placeholder. as far as the issues with AC Transit and their struggles with battery electric buses, so battery electric buses are new technology, so just like their fuel cell struggles, our battery electric buses struggles are similar as well, so is ours. One advantage we have is that AC Transit have a lot of long routes that are way above 150 miles, so what they're saying is that they need to buy like a bus and a half to retire one regular diesel hybrid buses because they have to charge in between. What we're saying is that we need to charge the bus once, and we will be able to complete our daily mileage need here. So that's the difference between us and AC Transit. But as far as electrification is concerned, electrification is very expensive. And we're going to rely, and you probably saw on the chart that I showed, there's a lot of facilities that we need to upgrade. And it's not like we're just going to upgrade our facility and install charging infrastructure only, because some of our facilities are 100 years old. So that alignment that we need to do is that's what's very, very expensive as well. And we're not just going to rush into any electrification for sake of getting electrification, even though it is a mandate from California Air Resources Board, but it is very expensive. So we're really going to look at all those aspects while we make this choice.
So I guess as a follow-up, is there any indication of a plan to have an actual stated kind of cost benefit or alternatives analysis to look and see? Because you did mention multiple times that the BEB category is not strictly only going to be BEBs. It could include other zero-emission technologies. Is there going to be some kind of analysis to try and determine the role of, the role or strategy of maybe maintaining or expanding size of the trolley bus fleet by using IMC technology, leveraging IMC technology to serve more routes without having to build more overhead wire and stuff?
Yeah, so like I said, we will see. That's why we were in the pilot program, to see how the IMC will work. But like I said, the IMC program is not ready to be deployed yet. We're still learning about. Our number one focus is to make sure the trolley bus technology stays relevant and that manufacturers are able to offer that technology. So that's our number goal. As far as the zero-emission buses go, we're looking at fuel cells, we're looking at battery electric buses, we're looking at trolley buses as well. But we're not necessarily doing any detailed analysis, cost-benefit analysis, because that's too early to do that. And it's really, we have to look at whether there's actually demand for trolley buses, why the manufacturers see who else is we're not aware of anybody new that's going to adopt to trolley technology. You have overhead wire infrastructure, it certainly makes sense to keep it and keep operating it. Trolley buses, there are a lot of other considerations that are out there. For example, our overhead infrastructure. That's a very detailed analysis that we would have to do because we have a 30 substation throughout the city. What it would take to get additional power to each of the substations, that would be a very, very detailed analysis.
All right, I'll just end here, but just as a comment that same analysis seems like it'd be pretty necessary for determining, any conversion of the bus yard to be able to charge battery buses in sufficient scale, and also the plans for building out those yards. That's already happening right now. So, the timeline showed a lot of action happening on that before 2030. So I don't see why it wouldn't be appropriate to do analysis on the buses themselves, since you determine that you're going to do more or less of a certain type of bus that clearly is tied directly to that charging and maintenance infrastructure that we're already starting to move on. But I'll go ahead and cede for the other people.
Member Ortega?
Hi, I have two different comments on two different things, or two different questions on two different things, I guess. The first is the Muni Metro Station condition assessment. I know you mentioned that you changed the project scope, but that effectively doubled the budget. And I was curious if I could just get a very, very brief reminder of what caused the budget to double. Because that seems like it's good that we can move the money from another source, but I'm curious why it ballooned so much.
We have Peter Gabancho on the line.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Yes, it wasn't what caused the project budget to double was we talked to some consultants about the scope of work that we had and what we were trying to accomplish and the amount of money that we thought we would need. And the answer we got back was that we would need about twice as much money. We originally had just under $500,000, and the lowest cost we got from the people we talked to was in the neighborhood of $1 million. And the higher end was 1.2 to 1.3 million. So we realized that if we put the project out with the current scope, we would not be able to pay for the proposals, or in all likelihood, we would get proposals that greatly exceeded the budget that we had to do the work. And so we put in an application. We went back and looked at changing the scope, and then we put in an application to get additional funding.
Okay, I guess I'm curious though, what caused this? Like, was it just we didn't have a good understanding of the cost until we put the budget in, or is it that there was scope creep?
It's not that there was scope creep. It was we did an internal cost estimate and thought we had a good understanding of it, but when we went to check, we were talking to people about, oh, we're going to put this project out. This is what the scope of work is like. And we told them it's like we're valuing it about this. They came back and told us that they didn't think that the work could be done for that amount of money. Not all the stations. And so we delayed putting out the project until such a time as we could either reduce the scope to a point that we thought we could afford it, or secure the additional funding. So initially, the problem was initially our independent cost estimate was just wrong, and we used that to request funding. And then as we dug further into the project, completed the contract documents, and we're getting ready to advertise, we discovered that that our cost estimate was way off.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. And I guess just as a small follow-up question, this can be answered offline. Have we done anything to change the internal metrics so that way our internal estimating is closer with what the actual costs would be? Again,
yeah, and we can discuss it offline. I want to point out that one of the things that we did, because we had concerns about it, was we did that initial consulting with consultants that we had worked with in the past to get to kind of confirm what our expectations were. But cost estimating is very tricky, and in this case, we didn't do a good job of it.
yeah, no, I get it. I just wanted to confirm that. Thank you so much. My second question is about the trolley buses as well. It's a different analysis, I think, that would be interesting to do, which is you made a note that we can have a lighter battery. But one of the things that I think that would be interesting and something that we should have as part of the larger discussion, if not have an analysis for, is the weight comparison of the trolley buses versus the weight comparison of the electric battery buses, and what the effect of the road usage is going to be on it. Because as we know, electric vehicles are very heavy. This is the result of batteries. This is true in cars. This is true in buses, I'm sure. So have we done any analysis of the wear and tear of the street and infrastructure with this new weight, we should probably have an idea with the current bus fleet, right? And if you assume a certain weight, I'm assuming you can figure out some type of ratio, which would probably create more of a napkin math situation, which should hopefully save you guys some time on this very deep analysis. But have we done any looking at the road infrastructure and how that will be affected as we transition to an electric fleet?
Yeah, so our current battery electric buses and trolley buses essentially weigh the same. Battery electric buses may be probably like 200, 300 pounds, but compared to them, they're both like 35,000 pounds each, 34 to 35,000 each. But it's a good point because there's also a California vehicle code that limits the axle weight, and battery electric buses are approaching that. So manufacturers are working very closely with all the sub-suppliers to reduce the weight on battery electric buses. For us, it's not going to be as big of a problem because we're not going to buy buses with large amount of battery, but it is an issue with battery electric buses and fuel cell and trolley for that matter.
Great, thank you so much. I'm happy to hear that it's similar and so that the similar effects would be the same. That was my only question for this, Chair.
I have a couple of questions. One is probably for SFMTA staff. I was wondering, with respect to the midlife overhaul project, I saw that there was a potential consideration to delay some bus phase 2 midlife overhaul project as part of the menu of cost-saving measures presented to the MTA board last week. I was wondering if that program has any overlap with the programs described here, and if that does get delayed, would that impact the overall cost of the programs described in this item?
Hi, this is Gary Chang with SFMTA. I presumable that you're referencing is the midlife overhaul phase 2 project that is being presented. So at the SFMTA board meeting, it did mention about there's a certain cost reductions basically is to bridge the financial gap and potentially will be postponing or delaying. So, what I want to mention there is, first of all, I think this is still on the discussions table. It hasn't been finalized yet. And as of today, we still have a plan to move forward with the overhaul projects. But however, what we're going to be doing is re-strategize and maybe doing it in a little bit smaller scale. And at the same time, maybe initially we're going to be launching some programs to do the campaigns to proceed with the overhaul. So as of today, to answer your questions, that delay has not been finalized. It's still at the discussions at this point, but we are still, based on my directive, we are still moving forward with the overhaul.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate
Thank you.
that. And then my second question is about the battery electric bus report. Member Ortega actually asked the question that I wanted to ask about curb weight. I was wondering, though, generally, do we consider other particulate emissions besides greenhouse gas emissions when we evaluate which technology to use? And are we able to measure the difference in tire wear, for example, associated with different bus technologies? Would you expect there to be any measurable difference?
So if you look at the overall greenhouse gas emission, our fleet contributes like 0.02% of the San Francisco's transportation emission. So it's very low. So we don't go into even further detail analysis on what it would do to the tires and things of that nature. But, electrification cost is very, very high. And so the best way to reduce the emission is to get people out of the car. Somebody did a back of the napkin calculation, and if you remove like 7,000 cars off the road, that'd be equivalent of us electrifying the fleet. But no, we haven't gone to that level of detail.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I certainly agree that it is whatever we can do to get people out of cars faster is the best way to reduce emissions. I think that's where a lot of these questions come from when we talk about these massive investments and like shifting to a whole new technology as opposed to just focusing on expanding the existing network. But I understand the various considerations at play here. Okay, yeah, thank you. That answers my question. If there are no other questions or comments from members, we can go to...
Tracy, may I insert one thing before public comment?
Oh, sure.
Thank you. It's just because there was a response online to the earlier question about the PCCs that not everyone may have seen because we had a slight technical glitch. Janet Gallegos is the project manager for the PCCs. The question was about you asked it about the $2 million estimate for rehab. And Janet, through Gary, thank you, said that the cost of rehab is mostly due to the unknown conditions of the vehicle. Nothing is off the shelf. I think the rest of this is a lot of the components and restoration are probably done by hand.
Thank you. We can take public comment in the room if there is any.
Thank you, Edward Mason. Regarding the PCCs that they acquired from New Jersey, that was at about the late 90s, so they're getting on to almost 25, 30 years of service, and I assume that Muni is going to do it and not have a contractor or a vendor do it. So let's face it, these are historic vehicles that are going to need a lot of tender loving care. Regarding the electrification, according to Utility Dive, there was a recent article that mentioned the electrical grid and the demand for electricity. And one is being driven by the data centers and artificial intelligence, which is increasing the demand for electricity. There was the second item was the variability of electricity because of wind power and sun power, and I always like to say the moon don't generate any electricity. So that is a problem that you have. And the biggest issue is the network transmission lines, and building that out is really a very big concern along the electrical industry. So there's going to be a lot of bumps in the road that I can see from what I am reading currently as to trying to implement this for the future. We hope, and also on workforce, although we say we're going to train the workforce, well, I look at it from the population, the depopulation that's going on in the world right now generally. The birth rate is not replacing the population. So, and that has been ongoing now for the last, since about 2015 or so.
Thank you for your comment.
There were two items that we had on this.
It was one item? Was it? I think it's just one item.
Continue on, thank you. There's a depopulation that is occurring, and consequently, I look at it from the workforce standpoint that you aren't going to have the people there. So it's going to be more important to try to recruit the people that are going to be available through City College and all the other programs that were established by Muni, before the pandemic. And there's not been any word on how successful that City College program was trying to recruit people. So the Valley Transportation Authority has gone with Mission College and is graduating people, whether they be mechanics, overhead line workers, bus operators, in program. And I have not seen anything from Muni based on their prior agreements that they had with City College here for recruiting future employees. And that's going to be even more critical because there are not going to be enough people, you know. You have over 12,000 people a day turning 65. So as they're going through the process, you know, it's creating a vacuum in the workforce from behind. So that somebody has to address the demographics and the hiring for future employees to maintain this equipment that we're expecting to have, because I hate to say it, you know, there may be a situation where you're not going to have trained employees to be able to maintain all of this equipment. So demographically, there needs to be some thought given to it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Is there additional public comment in the room? Okay. I think we're going to, that's 4 minutes. I think we need to give everybody 4 minutes now.
Just a moment.
Thank you very
Operator?
much.
Oh, just a moment. Operator, please set the timer for 4 minutes.
All right, the best of public comment. Hi, everybody. Good evening, members. My name is Alex Flansburgh. I'm the Research and Advocacy Director for the San Francisco Electrical Construction Industry. I am one of the co-authors of this report over here and really coordinated the technical part. Didn't do it myself. I want to thank, first of all, Bhavin for his presentation, because I think what we've seen in this presentation is actually a real shift in MTA and the way they're thinking about approaching this. And I think this is reflective of the work that we've done here since well, the report was published in July 2023, and for about a year of basically my bugging them prior to that. What I think the fundamental failure as a planner that I'm seeing is that we're moving forward with a multi-billion-dollar capital program designed around a specific technology, or really being built around a specific technology, without having done any of the real analysis necessary to figure out whether that's what we necessarily want to do. The fact is that every measure of battery bus performance that we've seen between the advocacy for the implementation of the clean transit rule in California, ARB's implementation of the clean transit rule, and what we're seeing in actual performance has actually been lower. We've seen manufacturers fail. We've seen actual buses just perform really poorly. Bhavin didn't mention that our own availability of these battery buses that we have is below 2/3, under 60, between 55 and 65%, depending on the bus itself. And there are multiple pictures of all dozen of these things just sitting at the yard, not in revenue service. The fundamental problem is that even as we're making these little tweaks, what they don't mention is that batteries degrade, and that even though you might have an appropriately sized battery on the front end of your when you buy this thing, after a few years of rapid charging, which is what we would need to be doing in order to maintain to be able to charge these things appropriately, you have a significant battery degradation. What an eye on this, trying not to go over, but the main thrust, as you can see in the letter that I passed out, that it was sent to at that point Mayor-elect Lurie, and continuing to talk to folks in the city as well, is that we really do need to conduct this analysis. The work that we did, we offered immediately to work closely with MTA to actually ground truth the technical assumptions that we put together, the modeling that had been done. It was done in conjunction with Metro de Medellin, which looks to which to me was relayed as looks to San Francisco as a big brother in terms of transit systems, in terms of trolleys overall. Granted that in the U.S. and in Canada, we are where we are, but we see cities like Edmonton realizing that their battery bus transition program is an utter failure, and they are ruining the day that they eliminated their overhead line system. But we are seeing in Mexico City, they just opened a new trolley bus line. I've been informed by the team that I worked with in Medellin that they are actually in planning their own BRT. They are looking at trolley buses, and we're seeing this happen across Europe as well when these side-by-side analyses are done. What's troubling is that right now MTA is going to be mothballing about 100 trolley buses that we've spent. A lot of 40-footers, 60-footers that are going to be sitting and probably eaten by rats, being degraded off on the side, and we're going to be spending $118 million to put diesel hybrid into service, rather than spending, let's say, $500,000 to figure out
Thank you for your comment.
the best way to go. Anyway, please support a study.
Thank you for your comment. If there's no additional public comment in the room, is there any remote public comment on this item?
Going to the first caller. Hi, caller, your 4 minutes begins now.
Hi, good evening, and I'm not going to need 4 minutes. This is Roland. So I just want to express how glad I am that you have decided not just to rip up this marvelous infrastructure that you've got all over San Francisco that was supporting the trolley buses, even though you're not using them. Because rather than looking at this infrastructure as something obsolete, this is actually an asset. What you've got all over San Francisco is something unique, which is a grid. And the grid at the correct voltage is 750 volt DC, which is exactly what you need for DC fast charging. Now, from what I've heard, you figured out that you're not going to have to recharge your buses on the fly. But if you ever wanted to extend your routes to a neighboring county, for instance, you'd be able to do this because you'd be able to make a stop and make a quick recharge instead of going all the way back to the depot. And even if you don't need this, you've got to start thinking about the need that you're going to have all over the city, not for level 2 charging or for apartments, which takes forever, like the whole night, but DC fast charging that can charge a car or even a small van, a small passenger van in a matter of minutes, no hours, not hours. So think of it as a grid that you can go and tap into to provide DC fast charging all over the city. And you're probably going to be ahead of most cities in the United States. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. There is no more remote public comment.
Great, thanks so much. Public comment on this item is closed. No other discussion from members. May I have a motion and a second to approve item 7? Moved by member Levine. Can I get a second or?
I'm sorry, Chair. Can I ask a clarifying question real quick? I think because I am a little confused. What we're voting on is not actually regarding the trolley buses, correct? It's just a presentation that we had at the end, or I just want to make sure I understand this correctly before I go forward. Sorry, there's a lot. We spent like an hour on this. I'd like to just make sure I know what I'm actually voting for.
For new AV equipment for us. Thank you for keeping us honest, Member Ortega, always. This is voting on the 5-year prioritization program amendment, which was just programming funds to the midlife and other projects.
Okay. Thank you.
I have another point of clarification, but one of those 5 YPP amendments was programming funds to, like, the, not just the overhaul, but like towards the acquisition of these vehicles that will go into this strategy for how to meet CARB's goal, right? Or no?
It's the the item that is before you is an amendment to the existing 5-year prioritization program for the Muni Maintenance Prop L program. And when the 5YPP was adopted in its current status, the program of projects included vehicle procurements, and the board has actually already allocated those funds, and that included 18 battery electric buses, and it included 94 hybrid motor coaches, and it included also the charging infrastructure for the 18 buses at Woods and Islias Creek, among other projects. So that has already been approved. So what is before you tonight is 9 new projects with a series of overhauls. I think the only new vehicle procurements that are in this suite of projects are the paratransit vehicles and vehicle overhauls. And then there is also facility upgrades for Kirkland and station assessment, and there might be one more that I can't remember off the top of my head.
Okay, that's a very helpful clarification, Ms. LaForge. So, and just one more clarifying question for you. So that the reason why we saw the presentation on the approach towards meeting the zero emission goals is because of the Kirkland facility improvement. Like, that's how it's connected. Is that right? Again, I feel very embarrassed asking this very silly question. Okay. Okay.
It was in response to the CAC member interest about the fleet, and there was a nexus between the item tonight to integrate the presentation along with the Muni Maintenance 5YPP amendment.
I think it's accurate to say that the Kirkland Yard electrification is the only changing program or changing project in what? So we're voting on some changes to projects, right? Like we're specifying projects that the funding would go to, and the Kirkland Yard electrification, I think, is the only project that has some overlap with the zero emission fleet presentation. I think that is accurate to say.
Yes.
So there was a motion by Member Levine.
Can I have a motion to pull the Kirkland Yard out of the set?
Yes.
Like just separate it so that I can have a different vote on it.
To sever the item.
I want to sever it.
It's seconded by Member Milford Rosales. Madam Clerk, can we get a roll call vote? Or we need to take a vote to sever it first, right?
Jenny, so you do not need a vote to sever it. So we would take 2 votes. So it's a little bit funny, but we're going to make it work. One would be a motion to approve the 5YPP without the Kirkland project, and then we'll vote on whether or not to program the funds to the Kirkland project.
Okay.
Sorry, may I ask one more clarifying question? Okay, so the 5 YPPs that we're that's before us to be approved. Maybe this is a question for you, Ms. LaForte, but what percentage of Prop L does this funding, this like roughly, what is it, 146 million? Like what percentage of that are we talking here overall?
Muni, I can say overall over 30 years, the Muni Maintenance Program has over 700 million program to it, and it is orders of magnitude the highest, the largest program. The next one up is the portal at 300 million, and this category has over 700 million over 30 years, and the 140, I think there is 146 million of the 700 some odd million that is programmed in this first 5 years. So the funding is advanced already in the strategic plan baseline because we wanted to incorporate those programmatic needs, since this program is a driver of any financing cost that might be necessary. That has already been incorporated into the strategic plan. So this is just naming specific projects for that $47 million worth of placeholder funding that is already programmed.
Can I get a motion and a second to approve all of the items, except for the Kirkland Yard? Do you have
Motion to
another? Oh, okay. Motion moved by Member Bars, seconded by Member Milford Rosales. Madam Clerk, can we get a roll call vote, please?
On the motion to approve the 5 YPP without the Kirkland project, Member Bars.
Bars, aye.
Bars, aye. Vice Chair Daniels. Daniels absent. Member Ford. Ford absent. Member Kim.
Kim, aye.
Kim, aye. Member Levine.
Levine, aye.
Levine, aye. Member Margarita.
Margarita, aye.
Margarita, aye. Member Milford Rosales.
Milford Rosales, aye.
Milford Rosales, aye. Member Ng.
Ing, aye.
Ng, aye. Member Ortega.
Ortega, aye.
Ortega, aye. Chair Siegel.
Siegel, aye.
Siegel, aye. There are 8 ayes. The motion is approved.
Great, thank you. And then can I get a motion on the Kirkland Yard item?
I'll say if it's not clear, it would be a motion to program $5.496 million for design for the Kirkland Yard electrification project.
Can someone, are people able to make a motion against it if they're not wanting to make a motion for it? I'm not. Okay, moved by Member Kim to vote to approve the item. Seconded by Member Ng. Madam Clerk, can we get a roll call vote, please?
On the motion to approve funds for the Kirkland project, Member Bars.
Bars, aye.
Bars, aye. Vice Chair Daniels. Daniels absent. Member Ford. Ford absent. Member Kim.
Kim, no.
Kim, nay. Member Levine.
Levine, aye.
Levine, aye. Member Margarita.
Abstain.
Margarita, abstain. Member Milford Rosales.
Milford Rosales, nay.
Milford Rosales, nay. Member Ng.
Ing, aye.
Ng, aye. Member Ortega.
Ortega, abstain.
Ortega, abstain. Chair Siegel.
Siegel, no.
Siegel, nay. There are 3 ayes. The motion fails.
Okay, great. That's on item 8, which is to adopt a motion of support to allocate $2 million in Prop L funds with conditions for 3 requests, and this is an action item. Anna Lafort, Deputy Director for Policy and Programming, is here to present this item.
Okay, thank you. Anna Lafort, Deputy Director for Policy and Programming, happy to present 3 Prop L requests tonight. The first of the requests you heard extensively about in the last item. This is for the allocation of $1.5 million in funds that was just recommended for programming in full. Currently, there's $750,000 program. This the 5YPP amendment that you just approved rounded out the funding plan for a full $1.5 million to fund the scope of work to do the condition assessment of the 9 Muni Metro subway stations from Embarcadero to West Portal. The assessment will consider structural, mechanical, and electrical components of each station and will be used to develop maintenance and capital improvement campaigns. It will also include an independent review of deficiencies, estimates of repair options, and a final condition assessment report. The next request is from the neighborhood program. This was a request from Chair Melgar to advance a project for design and construction of a series of transportation improvements to address pedestrian safety on Monterey Boulevard between Acadia Street and San Anselmo Avenue. Monterey is a major arterial connecting to I-280 and 19th Avenue and serving as a key corridor for multiple neighborhoods. The scope of work includes lane restriping for vehicle travel lanes to a narrower width, a rectangular rapid flashing beacon at the east side crosswalk at Acadia and Monterey, and painted safety zones and refreshed and new continental crosswalks, as well as daylighting at intersections. The allocation request form that is in your materials includes a map with the locations and the specific treatments at those locations for your reference. And the third of the 3 requests is also from SFMTA. This is for $150,000 in Prop L funds to match a $1.3 million state grant for transportation-focused resiliency planning along the Embarcadero from China Basin to Aquatic Cove and extending inland approximately to Broadway, Powell, and 5th Streets. The primary outcomes include identification of corridor alternatives and of the preferred configuration for the Embarcadero corridor to optimize safety, mobility, resilience, and access. A mobility plan with a suite of key moves that San Francisco could pursue for further development as methods to enhance mobility and to protect assets. And also public engagement to gain input and to inform the plan on for what a resilient Embarcadero corridor looks like, and an implementation framework to advance interdepartment and interagency coordination on key policy issues and funding mechanisms. The SFCTA, the Port of San Francisco, Public Works, and SF Planning will participate on a technical advisory committee to provide feedback on key decisions. And the last slide just shows the project area for your reference. And with that, I can take any questions, and we have project managers here as well.
Thank you for the presentation. Member Bars?
Yes, thank you. With respect to the Monterey Safety Plan, I would like I have some reservations about this project, even though that I know that it has been tested by my supervisor in the district that in which I serve, and many of my friends and neighbors are very excited about the opportunity to make improvements to Monterey Boulevard. I am personally not persuaded that the suite of treatments included in the plan and that we're requesting design funds for will be sufficient to actually improve the safety on Monterey Boulevard. So I would really love it if anybody from SFMTA could speak to how these particular treatments were selected.
Sure, I can do that. Paul Stanis, Acting Pedestrian Program Manager for Livable Streets in the SFMTA. So these specific treatments were selected in consultation with the supervisor's office, and they actually came out of a walking tour last year with our city transportation engineer and a few staff and some neighbors and I think a representative or two from the supervisor's office. We see these improvements as kind of in our quick build realm, highly effective, but cost effective as well. So the restriping of the roadway along Monterey is intended to narrow the roadway, and even though it's not physically narrowing Monterey, especially from the perspective of the permanent median there, but at least gives a visual that the roadway is a little bit more narrow. And then some of the other treatments are very standard in our quick build toolkit. So there are some crosswalks along Monterey that do not have our continental striping, which is pretty standard throughout San Francisco today. And then one of the big ticket items is the rapid rectangular flashing beacon. So that is something that we've earmarked for $50,000. And that is actually much less expensive than what it typically costs to do in San Francisco. Usually the cost is around $500,000 to $700,000. But because there is some existing infrastructure that we can build off of, it's actually much cheaper to do at that single location. So I think if you look at the suite of improvements and recommendations, there's a lot in there for almost the entire stretch of Monterey, but it's very effective, or we hope that it's very effective, given the price tag for them.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Stanis. And in fact, I was actually invited to participate in that walking tour. Unfortunately, my son had surgery that day, so I had to miss it, which I was disappointed and also surprised that there were so few follow-up opportunities. But I understand people are busy. My specific concerns are actually not about the cost effectiveness of the rapid flashing beacon at Acadia, but whether there should be a crosswalk at Acadia at all. It's within, I think, between 100 and 500 feet of a highway off-ramp, a very poorly designed and very confusing intersection. Vehicles regularly speed through that. I walk it almost every day with my son, and it's a really awful place for a crosswalk. It's a very strange position to be in, to want to increase pedestrian safety in San Francisco very badly, but also not believe that that particular location is a good one for a crosswalk. But that is the opinion that I've come to. I think my other concern is I really do appreciate your clarification about the quick build toolkit. That's very clear to me, or rather that helps explain why we've selected the treatments that we have. And given that this is on the high injury network, that does make sense. However, what I'm struck by is how there's one very clear problem intersection on this corridor, which is the intersection of Congo and Monterey. And I'm just surprised to not see any acknowledgement of that. Like, that's where there's repeated issues with sideswiping along Congo. The crosswalks are dreadful to cross. I cross one, again, almost every day with my preschool son because my son's preschool is at that intersection. So can you explain why that intersection is not addressed?
I can try to. I think that's something that we would be able to talk to our school-related programming, and if you would like, I can talk to that program manager specifically, because I think there is a real focus on the school there, and if there's something that we could do outside of everything that we're proposing today, we can do that. So if you're the expert, you walk there every day. So if there are things that you see that we could do, we could easily try to improve that area close to the school.
Okay, then maybe we should follow up on that. Thank you.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Is that Member Ortega? Is that your card?
Yes, I really just wanted to give a thank you to the SFMTA and the presenters for adding all of the maps on the Embarcadero. I complain a lot about them, so I really appreciate that you guys added a liquefaction map, which, as many know, I have a geologist for an aunt and uncle, and the first thing that they told me when I moved to San Francisco was I had to look out for liquefaction, and my response was, what is that? So if you don't know what that is, highly recommend looking it up. It's something to consider. But I really appreciate that all various factors, including the land, the usage, the tides, are being looked at for this study, and I just wanted to do a call out for that. I look forward to the results, as my office is at Pier 28, and I had to evacuate when there was a tsunami warning, so I'd really love to not worry about that. So great, thank you.
Member Margarita?
Thank you for the presentation. I just had a question with regards to the area in Monterey Boulevard because it is very little cost that you're looking up to make upgrades, et cetera, at crosswalk. Would that also include putting signal there? Because I also echo the other members' member Barr's concern with ensuring that that also includes adding a light there, not just a crosswalk. So I just had a question about that. Thank you.
Sure. So what was your question specifically? If there's an ability to add a signal along the corridor?
Correct. Does that, with the cost that you're looking at, does that include also adding a signal? I mean, I know it's off of the table now, but I was just concerned, especially because there's a school close by, a freeway off-ramp, et cetera. And I know, again, it's off the table, but I know that not too long ago, SFMTA was looking at eliminating cross guards. And so, again, just thinking about safety for elders and children, especially close to a school. I'm just asking specifically, what would the upgrades be, and does it include adding a signal there?
So the upgrades that are proposed include upgraded crosswalk striping. It includes pedestrian safety zones at some corners. It includes restriping the edge lines along Monterey to make it look like a more narrow street. And it also includes some money for rapid rectangular flashing beacon, which is one of those crosswalks and buttons that you would push. And then there's kind of those two yellow lights that are rectangles that flash back and forth and just alert motorists to the presence of pedestrians. But there's nothing in here that would include upgrades or, a design and construction of a new traffic signal along Monterey. New traffic signals in the city are around $1 million to $1.25 million per location. So that would be much higher than what the budget would allocate for right now.
And so my follow-up question to that is, there already a crosswalk there already? And I'm sorry, I don't cross there, walk there much like the other member. So is it just improving what's already there, or is it just adding a new crosswalk? That would clarify my question. Thank you. Thank you.
Sure. So if I believe the school crosswalk is at Congo, and there already is a striped continental crosswalk there. But as I mentioned earlier, I will talk to Sarah about additional opportunities for improvements at the crosswalk at that location. But it is already striped, and it does, for the most part, meet all of the, or does include all of the measures that we have in our quick build toolkit typically. But I'm sure there's always something else we can do.
Chair, may I just respond?
Yeah.
So, Member Margarita, thank you very much. I wanted to, my son's preschool is at the corner of Monterey and Congo, so I know this extremely well. I'm going to use a not very technical term, which that intersection is terrifying as a user. And I can say that my preschool knows that I'm in the transportation universe and has actually asked me several times, like, what can you possibly do to fix this, right? Like, this is again, qualitative perspective. This is a very unpleasant intersection. And I think maybe one thing to put this in perspective, part of the reason why this part of Monterey is on the high injury network, in my opinion, is that there's a freeway off-ramp that goes, then there's 5 blocks from that freeway off-ramp, 4 travel lanes, 2 in each direction, and there's no traffic lights. So you have something like between 10,000 and 12,000 cars coming like that every day along that stretch. And the first traffic light that they hit is maybe like a little bit less than a mile away from that initial off ramp where there is a signal. So when you're velocitized and driving a car, and I know I drive in my neighborhood, it's like your instinct is just like to keep going, and so you push the boundaries of these four-way stops. And there's a preschool at one of this intersection, which is where like I would really love a bigger conversation around this boulevard. And one other like fun little point, which is that the auto volume on this stretch of Monterey is twice that of, say, Valencia, where there actually is a traffic signal at every intersection. So it is kind of curious how that happens. And I know this stretch of Monterey is on the high injury network. I know we want to use the quick build toolkit to address it, and I don't want to stop that. I do want. Mr. Stanis, your responses have actually won me over. I was inclined to not support this project, but I think this is bigger than what the quick build toolkit can do. And the very fact that like we've signalized certain arterials in the city where we have far less auto volume, but then we don't consider signalizing others like Monterey, I think is a big mistake.
If there are no other questions or comments from members, we can go to public comment in the room. Is there any public comment? Operator, is there any remote public comment on this item?
There is no public comment.
Great. Public comment on this item is closed. May I have a motion and a second to approve item 8? Moved by Member Ortega. Seconded by Member Milford Rosales. Madam Clerk, can we get a roll call vote, please?
On the motion to approve item 8, Member Bars.
Bars, aye.
Bars, aye. Vice Chair Daniels. Daniels absent. Member Ford.
Ford, aye.
Ford, aye. Member Kim.
Kim, aye.
Kim, aye. Member Levine.
Levine, aye.
Levine, aye. Member Margarita.
Margarita, aye.
Margarita, aye. Member Milford Rosales.
Milford Rosales, aye.
Milford Rosales, aye. Member Ng.
Ng, aye.
Ng, aye. Member Ortega.
Ortega, aye.
Ortega, aye. Chair Siegel.
Siegel, aye.
Siegel, aye. There are 9 ayes. The motion passes.
Great. Thank you so much. In the interest of time, given that it is 7:40, I think perhaps we should take the, should we go to the ethics training item to make sure that all members are able to be here for that one? Yeah, okay. So let's go to item 10. That's the Community Advisory Committee Ethics Training for Public Meetings. This is an information item. I believe Maria Lombardo will provide a brief introduction to this item. And then Amber Maltby, legal counsel, will then present.
Thank you so much. And Anna, would you kindly get Amber Maltby from Funicular? Cynthia will. Oh. I am cognizant of the hour. I could just give you the top line and then we can come back to it, or I can meet individually or bring it next time.
Yeah, I just want to be mindful of any like legal requirement. If it's not time sensitive, we can just go on to item 9. Okay, great. Let's go to item 9 then. That would be the Regional Transportation Revenue Measure polling results. This is an information item. Also, Maria Lombardo, Chief Deputy Director, is with us to present this item.
Okay, what's your preference? Our speaker is back for the next item.
Oh, okay. Well, we already, is it okay if we do the,
Good,
I
hang on.
apologize,
Okay.
the MTC report, if it's
No
already
worries.
queued up, let's go
We'll
for it.
zip through this really fast. Thank you for your patience for this. Very exciting time for posters right now with all of big transit operators in the Bay Area looking for solutions to stabilize transit so we avoid cutting service and making other difficult decisions as the federal COVID relief funds run out. And I won't do a lot more background because I know this group is very familiar with it. What I'm going to do is give you very high-level results, kind of a similar version that the TA board saw on Tuesday. Online is the full deck that was presented at MTC that has a lot more detail. And I also qualify this. If I can't answer something, we didn't run the survey, I'll be happy to follow up and get back. All right, so this, very quickly, I hope this works. MTC, after several months of work with a select committee, reached a very high-level sort of consensus and suggestions for some polling questions that they wanted there to be a voter survey about, and to bring that back to the commission to help guide them on the input that they will provide to Senator Wiener and SB 63, which would be the authorizing legislation for a regional measure. So as this poll was conducted by EMC in early January, and it tested these 3 different sort of poll questions, revenue measures, and I will just qualify it. The pollster was very careful to say this is a snapshot moment in time to kind of gauge how the public would be feeling about this. It's not like a campaign poll where you'd be like, well, this will win or not. But it gives us a good sense of where we are right now. So the 3 different revenue measures that were tested, I won't read the very long text there. The first was called, just the short name is 1A. It's a half-cent sales tax in 4 counties, Alameda, San Mateo, Contra Costa, and San Francisco. And that is focused on transit operations. Then there was a hybrid measure that includes both a half-cent sales tax and a parcel tax at 9 cents per square foot in the 9-county Bay Area region. I'll explain later why there are different numbers of counties. And then the last one is in the 4 counties I mentioned before. The other 3 counties would have a half cent, but San Francisco would have a 7/8 cents, a bigger amount, recognizing that San Francisco has bigger needs and lower ability to raise revenues like we talked about at a prior meeting. Oh, sorry, I forgot to say, the hybrid one, unlike the left and the right one I just mentioned, also includes money for other modes because it generates a lot more money because you have 2 taxes. So I won't go through this slide in detail, except for those of you reading it and who can see the tiny font. MOE, where you see it, is the margin of error. So if you plus or minus the % there, you'll see in many cases things overlap, which means they're not statistically significant. The map at the right shows you the 4 core counties, which were focused on for a number of reasons, which I'll touch on as I zip through the deck, but one of which is the major Bay Area operators with the biggest deficits are in those 4 counties. So Muni, BART, Caltrain, and AC Trans. So there's a lot of fun just sort of background, how are people feeling about stuff. So I'm just going to give you high points on all of this. I think no surprises on this slide. One of the big takeaways is there are more transit riders more often in the core counties, the 4 than the 9. That shouldn't be a surprise to any of you. And this slide summarizes the big picture, which I will say incidentally, today at its Advocacy and Major Project Committee, Caltrain released its poll results, which are also conducted by the same firm in the same time frame, and Caltrain was polling just on, I'll come back to this, various taxes just for Caltrain. Results are very similar though. So overall mood is, not so great. Y'all are out in the ethos right now. It's getting a little bit better, but it's still tough, and bad voter moods in general tend to, you have lower positive votes on taxes when you are pulling them. Good news, you ask people, are you interested in improving transportation? Yes is the answer. That gets tempered a little bit by, well, I'll back up. So people are hearing in the news, they're hearing about service cuts, especially if they live in the core area. Good news, folks, the Caltrain corridor are hearing about Caltrain electrification and BART fare gates. So they're hearing the positive and the negative. So starting to get into the big takeaways about where we are right now are the two options that just had a sales tax, everyone the same sales tax, one with the variable rates. They both came in on sort of the initial read and even after they heard support and opposing type arguments, just in the mid-50s, 50%, right? So just a majority. I will say if you put on a dedicated tax on the ballot, it requires 2/3, so 67%. We're not close. So that's why in this bullet, it's just pointing to the importance of MTC seeking authorization for a citizen initiative, and that only requires a majority vote. One finding of this is that the hybrid measure, the one that had two taxes, sales tax and parcel tax, it didn't do as well. It's not super different here, but it's definitely a little bit lower. And then I guess at the last two bullets, the key thing is sort of the positive arguments at this point in time don't make that much of a difference in how many people would say they'd vote yes. The opposing ones have a little bit more traction. But the main things that seem to be holding things back a little bit, besides just the overall voter mood seem to be lack of trust in government and unwillingness to raise taxes, a sense that cost of living is super high. But the rest of these slides will go a lot faster. So this one, there were a lot of questions that tested just sort of phrases and types of improvements to see how important they were. Nothing really surprising here. It's ordered from highest to lowest when you add up the blue, the extremely important and important, which is the light blue and dark blue. All of these are over a majority support, which is fun. No surprise, potholes always at the top of the list. Affordable housing, at the bottom of the list, but still more than majority think that's important to have affordable and housing stuff near transit. This is just open-ended question I'll come back to later, just about what people have heard, what their awareness is on transit. It's, pretty good in the Bay Area. Yeah, this one. Oh, so this slide is sort of asking voters if do they feel there is a need, like how much do we need to educate voters about the fact that transit needs more money? And you can see from the 70%, 67%, there generally is that awareness. Awareness of need is different, though, from whether you would vote for a tax increase to pay for that. I'm sorry, wrong way. So this goes back to when I was mentioning that one of the challenge points for a successful ballot measure right now is still that sort of sensitivity or aversion to taxes. And you can see over time that's bounced around a little bit. The bottom is the pre-pandemic. And then the top is more recently. You can see it's getting a little better, but it's still pretty high. To be aware of. What was that? Yeah, this slide was testing. If you asked folks messages, sort of gauging their willingness to raise taxes to deal with the issue, split, it's kind of hovering below the 50% mark. So not great, but not terrible. This slide is interesting. It seems like in a lot of ways we're divided right now. This question was a forced choice question, asking folks, is it most important to fund a variety of types of improvements, so not just transit, but also like roads and biking, or on the right statement be just, focus on transit. And it was sort of silent on operations or capital, and it's fairly split, you can see. Okay, so getting to just look at the time, getting to the more interesting part. Here's the initial vote, sort of the cold vote or cold responses, when folks were asked those questions that were at the very first slide about the half-cent sales tax, the hybrid, or the variable rate sales tax ballot measure. And they're not terribly different. You can see that the hybrid definitely has lower support than the other two, which are sales tax only. One thing that's a little bit interesting on this slide, its initial support is true on the final support. The prevailing sort of wisdom is, generally speaking, San Francisco and Alameda, which have a lot of transit riders and awareness, tend to vote more yes or favorably for these measures. The pollsters observe that these percentages are lower than usual, which is dragging down the overall sort of votes for yes. And speculate why. You can probably come up with some reasons. This table is just showing progression over time after the cold question, and then you hear sort of more information about the question and then opposition agreements. Not a lot of change on the two sales tax ones. The hybrid one did, the opposition arguments were a little bit more impactful. Let's see if there's anything to say. I think just to spare time, won't go in detail over a lot of these, but these slides show you the breakout by counties a little bit. So that's okay. Click. Okay. Right, so these slides captured questions where pollsters were trying to gauge sort of what are the messages that resonate the most with people, either to vote for or against. I'll let you read these on your own time, but one of the main comments that pollsters were making was there wasn't a lot of intensity, and that intensity sort of measured by that number of people who are like, this is very convincing, or even very plus somewhat. It's just nothing really pops, especially on the positive side. On the negative arguments, there's some in the 40s, like cost of living, as I said, that aversion to taxes is one of the biggest hurdles. And then here's just the general vote progression for 1A. This was the one with the half-cent sales tax across the 4 core counties. It's not, look at the margin of error, really different from initial to after opposition. Variable rate, I think the last thing I will say on this is I believe this is one of the first polls where we actually were able to test a variable rate question. So it is a very valuable finding that basically that polled as well as the fee pays the same. So that's something San Francisco we probably want to look at because we have more needs than the other counties. I think that might be, yeah, there's nothing really new with the rest of it. So I'll kind of just stop there. And I will maybe send to you, if you're interested, the Caltrain poll results. Yeah, very, very similar. One thing that pops up is, no surprise, Caltrain is very popular. But a lot of the general sort of how people are feeling, the aversion factors are very similar to what you saw in this. One thing I'll just note, they did their own poll and they didn't do a measure like, well, if there's a Caltrain measure and there's a regional measure, how would they do on the same ballot? Like that question wasn't so informative to look.
Great, thank you so much for the detailed presentation. Are there any questions or comments from members on the item? Member Margarita?
Thank you so much for the presentation. That was really helpful, and even the graphs and everything. But I was going to ask, did Golden Gate Transit do also their own, or because I know a lot of times they want to separate themselves, so I was just interested in what, if they did one separately as well.
Thank you. Sorry, I should have said something about that. I don't know if Golden Gate Transit has done a poll, but I can find out. But great example, because that Golden Gate Transit covers the North Bay and us as well. And so what I didn't point out, but when you go back and look, the hybrid version, which in addition to having 2 taxes, which probably turned people off, if you just look at how folks are feeling and awareness in the 9 counties. The North Bay, fewer people ride transit. In general, you can look at it, and adding the North Bay would make this even harder to pass. So I think you're going to see MTC rapidly coalescing on this as a 4-county measure like that. But I will follow up if you like to see if Golden Gate did a poll. I know BART has done polls. Probably will do more. MTA budget to do a MTC will do another one after this as well.
Are there any other questions or comments from members? Member Ford?
Hopefully quick. In the poll question where they say there's info and then there's a question and then there's opposite, so considered like opponent's argument, or is it just we have a transit system and it costs us much time?
The info is, I guess that's fair. It is most like the proponent, and the opposing is clearly the opposing one. They're sort of, the resiliency of the
if there are no other questions or comments from members, we can take public comment on this item. Is there any public comment in the room? Is there any remote public comment?
Yes, going to our caller. Hi, caller, your 2 minutes begins now.
Hi, thank you. This is Ron. So very briefly, what I'd like to do is to echo the comments I made at the board meeting yesterday, is to attract your attention to the property tax element of the hybrid, which is based on square footage, not asset value, and that causes inequity issues. First, this tax proportionately impacts communities with lower asset values. I'll give you an example. Let's just take a farm in Gilroy, would be paying the same rate per foot as I mentioned in Atherton, and to me there's something profoundly wrong with this. And the last point I made at the board meeting is that I don't know if you're familiar with Prop 13, but that basically kind of freezes the asset value if you hang on to your property for a long time, which quite frankly is just about the only way that some seniors can possibly afford to live in the Bay Area anymore. If you go around and instead of that, a tax on the square footage, you're essentially going around Prop 13, and you're most likely to get sued by somebody saying, no, you can't do that. So I'd really like to bring that to your attention as basically an equity issue. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. There is no additional public comment.
Great. Public comment on this item is closed, and thank you again for the presentation and for agendizing this. So we can move on to item 10, the Community Advisory Committee Ethics Training for Public Meetings.
He's here. I was like, you couldn't just leave. All right, so this would be a quick session. For some of you who've heard it before, but it's always good to refresh on reminders about. There's some reminders in here about Brown Act. There are reminders. Well, actually, a lot of them are about Brown Act and ethics, and they cover topics ranging from gifts we need to be careful of, and what you may say on social media, where you got to be careful, and also topics I've talked to some of you before about is you don't want to have meetings with like a quorum of members where you're discussing something that would be before the body. And now that we're all tech savvy, there are times that emails and social media and phone calls can actually become a meeting, even if it's sort of in series with people. So we have Amber Malti, who's with Nossaman LLC, our counsel, who is going to do the overview on this. And Amber, would you like people to interrupt you on slides and or the chair, or wait till the end?
The presentation itself is kind of short, so I think we can wait until that. And
Hours, there will be a plaque formally pointing out that Shipment is the adoptive card organization once we meet that threshold.
Well, one thing you could do is have flyers there available while you're there physically for interested people who walk by and hand them.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. It is very nice to be here this evening. And again, my name is Amber Maltby. I'm with the law firm Nassaman, and I practice in political law, including government ethics for individual public officials as well as for public agencies. And as Maria mentioned, we will be going over two primary topics this evening, and we will keep the presentation short. I know it is a little bit late in the day, so the presentation really is tailored to cover the primary rules for you all to be aware of, kind of guidelines. This presentation is not meant for you yourselves to walk out of here tonight feeling as if you are government ethics attorneys, but rather to give you some guardrails to help make decisions while you're serving in this capacity as stewards of the public trust, as CAC members. So there are three primary goals for the training for this evening. One, again, it's for you to be able to issue spot, so identify when there might be an ethical issue, whether it's a conflict issue or a public meeting, open meeting law issue, so that you know when to reach out to CAC staff and ask for further advice. Also to identify when you might be facing a conflict, whether it's an actual conflict. Sometimes a situation might give the appearance of a conflict, and it may just be helpful to talk that out. So again, just giving you an opportunity to identify those scenarios, and then some practical guidelines on what to do in the event that you find yourself actually with a situation where you feel like you should step back and maybe not participate in a matter that's coming before the CAC. So the first question that you may be asking is, why are you getting this training? So the CAC is an interesting body within the framework of public ethics laws because you all are in an advisory position, meaning you make recommendations, you provide feedback, you're representing your districts, you're representing the segments of the community that you've been selected to provide feedback to the TA board and to communicate with the community. But the CAC itself does not make binding decisions. It does not vote on matters that subsequently bind the TA. It informs the TA and provides information to the community. As a consequence of not having this binding authority, being in an advisory position, it means that you all are not what are the legal term public officials under California's primary government ethics law, which is called the Political Reform Act. So the rules that we'll be going through tonight, many of them actually do not legally attach to you all, but because you are in a public position, because you are in a position of public trust, these rules provide a framework to inform how you conduct yourself, to ensure that you are conducting yourself in an ethical manner while you're serving on the CAC board. Because even if you don't meet that legal definition of a public official, you are still in a position of public trust. Additionally, you could become a public official. There is a history of law in California that um, finds that an advisory body can become essentially a government body, so that the board members are public officials if you are making recommendations to another board or another body for a long enough period of time, and that other body is rubber stamping it, approving it over long enough of a period of time that the law will say, okay, you are as good as a public official now because whatever you say ends up going with the board that you're advisory to. So we just want to be mindful of this, that we, the CAC is adhering to these laws because you could become public officials over the course of time. So it's really important to be aware of these laws, both for making sure your own legal liability, but also for the public trust as well. So this brings up, again, at that point, there are really two standards to be mindful of for a body, an advisory body like the CAC, which is you have the law, that is what you are required to do. That is what public officials are required to do. But then you just have ethical principles. So you should think about the law as the floor. That is the bare minimum. Whereas ethics is what decision are you making in any given circumstance that is serving the public interest in the role that you're in. So generally speaking, what this will look like will be making your decisions, as I'm sure that all of you do already, making your decisions based on the merits of the decision coming before you, not based on your own personal bias, your own personal loyalty, which may be particularly relevant where you're being appointed by a supervisor. And I heard one of you mention your supervisor may have a different opinion than you, and that's really good. That's what you should be doing when you're in here, is representing your opinion based on what you know is right for the people that you are representing. Also, even though you are not making binding decisions on federal or on public funding, you are making recommendations, so you should think of yourselves as stewards of public funds and taxpayer money. And certainly while you're in this position, you do not want to take personal advantage of the position that you're in. This is a, albeit advisory, important and influential position. So that's the framework. But then what is a conflict of interest? How will we identify that when it comes before us? And there are a number of ways to think about when there's a conflict of interest. The most basic being that what the law wants to prevent is you being conflicted by two competing priorities, a personal interest and the public interest for the seat that you're serving in. Additionally, preventing the opportunity to engage in self-dealing, which would be something like voting on a contract that would benefit yourself or a family member, is a very easy way to think about it. But a conflict of interest can be financial, it can be personal, and it can be prejudicial. So what we are going to talk about tonight is what a financial conflict of interest looks like. And again, I want to put this into the context, again, of the fact that the CAC is an advisory body, so it is not subject to this level of detailed law on what constitutes a conflict of interest. However, this is an informative framework to help guide you in your own decision-making, to identify, this is what the law says a conflict of interest would be. So this can help inform you when you're making your decisions about how to proceed. So the primary law for government ethics in California, I mentioned it's called the Political Reform Act.
and it sets out a test that says a public official may not participate may not participate in making or influence making a governmental decision in which they have a reasonably foreseeable material financial interest. So that's a mouthful, right? But really what we're looking at, what you would be looking at is the decision that's on before you to vote on, to take action on. Will you financially benefit, or will some source of income or financial interest that you have benefit if you cast a vote on that matter? So again, going back to the very easy decision, is it voting for the TA to hire a service provider that employs your spouse? That's a very easy, concrete way of thinking about when there's a financial interest. The Political Reform Act identifies 5 different types of financial interests that you should be looking for, including a source of income, a business position that you have, real property, gifts, so a source that has been a provider of gifts to you, and then your own personal finances. Once you've identified that a decision that you'll be making in your capacity as a CAC member might have a financial effect on one of those types of financial interests, then the next step in the analysis as set forth in the Political Reform Act is whether or not that financial effect is material enough, meaning is it really meaningful enough that you should be required to sit out from making that decision. So this is where we could really get into the weeds, and that's not what we're here for tonight, but just to give you an example of what the law is looking to would be a real property financial interest. So if there's a decision that comes before the CAC board and there's a property that is at issue on the decision that you're voting on, and that property is within 500, your personal property, is within 500 feet of that decision, the law presumes that that is a material financial effect on your interest in real property. So the law would require, unless an exception applies, for a public official to recuse themselves in that situation. Here, we would recommend that you reach out to staff to get more information so that you can make a decision if you should, in fact, recuse yourself. And we'll talk about the process in a moment, but just to give you an idea of how detailed and thoughtful these analyses are, and just to give you your own sense of how to proceed as you're thinking about voting on matters. So those are your financial interests, how to think about those. One of the types of financial interests I mentioned is the source of gifts, but there is, within the paradigm of ethics laws, there are gift limits. So CAC members, you are not actually subject to a legal gift limit. The state law, the Political Reform Act, imposes an annual limit on the amount of gifts that a public official can receive. That limit for 2025 is $630 from a single source in a calendar year. So that's fairly generous. Many jurisdictions set a lower limit. Many local jurisdictions also add on a complete ban for gifts from vendors, contractors, different types of sources that may have an interest in the business of the agency. For CAC members, the policy is not to accept lavish gifts, which is gifts of $100 or more. So if you are out with somebody who has an interest in front of what the TA is doing, and they offer to buy you a very nice meal, something to think about before you accept. The state law does have many, many exceptions for receiving gifts that would not be prohibited. Fortunately, the gift law likes to take into account that people have everyday relationships and situations where the person providing the gift isn't actually engaged in attempting to influence you in an improper way. There are many exceptions for things like an act of neighborliness, an act of human compassion. For example, the fires that just happened in LA, you know, a public official might be able to accept some relief in that regard without having to worry about the gift limits. So before I move on, I have a hypothetical for you all. Before I move on to that slide, I will pause here and see if there are any questions at this point. It's Mr. Kim.
Property open times like today or the before, local district stuff. For example, maybe District 1 has some transportation project going on, either, change lane or install the traffic signal or even removing parking. And it happens bigger place, but anybody house or their business within like 500 feet, this better, or so we can participate in voting, or those person who near that project area should be excluded?
So that's a great question and a great real world example of the type of thing that does come up and might trigger a conflict of interest. I say if you identify that you have real property within 500 feet or 1,000 feet actually of a decision, then you should reach out to staff, and they will reach out to council as appropriate to help navigate whether or not a recusal actually is required. Real property is an interesting financial interest because there are presumptions built in. There's a presumption that if the decision is within 500 feet of your real property, that there's a conflict of interest. But if it's between 501 feet and 1,000 feet, then there's only a conflict if you can essentially quantify a change in value to the property. And if it's over 1,000 feet, then there's a presumption that there's not a conflict that requires disqualification. So again, and the goal today is, that's a great question. That's exactly the type of thing that you should be looking for. And when it comes up, bring it to staff's attention so that we can dig into the details.
Property means extra building, right? Not office or
It would be, yeah, I mean, it would be real property, including like an actual brick, the building, leasehold interest potentially. If it's a month-to-month lease, maybe not. So again, I would suggest bringing it for further discussion when there's a vote to look at. Any other questions? So we have a hypothetical to test if you all have been paying attention this evening at 8:20 at the end of the meeting. So the hypothetical is as follows. So the CAC is scheduled to vote on a motion of support to approve a professional services contract with Acme Bay Area
at its next meeting. 3 days before the CAC meeting, Acme Bay Area's Government Affairs representative invites CAC member Bronin out for dinner and drinks. And once they are done eating, this Acme Bay Area representative offers to pick up the tab, and the total value of the meal and the drinks is $300, so $150 per person. So the first question is, does CAC member Bronin have a conflict, or will they have a conflict if they accept the meal? Okay. Let the record reflect. I'm getting thumbs up and nods all around. So correct. Yes, so this would certainly present an issue. It's over the agency's policy of a $100 limit for gifts. What steps, if any, do you all think that CAC member Bronin should take?
They should refuse the offer to pay for their food.
Certainly one course of action that they could take. Right. Or they can accept the meal and then recuse themselves from the vote. Yes.
Email Maria about it.
And so all those are all great options, and so the recommended the procedure for the agency, I think those were all correct answers. If in that scenario the CAC member did accept the meal, as opposed to declining it, which that's always an option, politely declining a meal, especially from a vendor, always an option. If the meal had been accepted, the first thing would be to notify the clerk at least 24 hours prior to the vote to let her know. And by the way, this is not just in the meal context. So, for example, member Kim's example, if there's a real property that you identify or you're not sure, does this property count as real property? Once you've looked at the agenda and you've identified, oh, I think this might be conflict, but I'm not sure, that's flag number one. Contact the clerk, and they will put into motion the next steps to guide you on whether or not you can participate or if you are required to recuse yourself. If it is determined that you are either required or it is in your best interest or the best interest of the CAC for you to recuse yourself, the next step in the procedure would be at the meeting, once the item is read, to state that you are recusing yourself from the discussion, and you're recusing yourself from the vote due to a conflict. We recommend identifying the source of the conflict, so you can say real property, for example, and then don't participate in that agenda item. And when your name is called, simply state abstain. And on the PowerPoint presentation, we have Amy's information, her email, and her phone number, so that you can reach out to her should this arise in the future. So we're actually changing gears. We're going to talk, I know we are very late in the evening. We'll talk very briefly about some basic Brown Act open meeting rules. Before I do, though, I'm wondering if anybody does have any questions on the procedure, Maria, maybe they can ask now with the benefit of everybody being here. Okay. Wonderful. Okay. So switching gears, now we're talking about the Brown Act, California's open meeting law. And unlike the ethics laws that we were just talking about, you all are subject to the Brown Act. So this is legally binding on you as individuals and on CAC as a body. The main rule under the Brown Act is that meetings of the public body and deliberations need to be conducted in public, and they need to follow procedural requirements, including an agenda that has been published in advance of the meeting, and that the items within the agenda are phrased in a certain way so that the public knows what to expect. The whole point of the Brown Act is so that the public understands the decisions that are being made and the deliberations that are going into those decisions. So what is a meeting? We are in a meeting right now. This part, right, might be obvious. But especially in today's hyper-technological age, and there are so many ways for us to communicate with each other. There are Slack channels and social media and whatnot. So it's really important to be aware that a meeting is not just when something has been put onto an agenda and everybody is gathered in a room. A meeting can happen accidentally. And if a meeting happens accidentally, then there's potentially a Brown Act violation. So you want to be mindful of what can constitute a Brown Act or constitute a meeting under the terms of the Brown Act. So a meeting can be an informal gathering of a majority of members of the body, the governing body. So that would be the CAC members present here. A majority of members on a conference call would constitute a meeting, or on a Zoom or a Teams call. Even an email can create a meeting if a majority of members end up participating on an email. So a very good rule of thumb that I've heard over the years is if you would like to communicate with your board members, don't send an email, and maybe there's a policy here, I imagine there is, but if you receive an email and you notice that all of your fellow CAC members are in that email, do not hit reply all. If you hit reply all, you could be inadvertently creating a meeting, which would be in violation of the notice meetings or notice requirements and agenda requirements of the Brown Act. There are opportunities for members of a legislative body to be together without violating the Brown Act. There are exceptions for things like educational conferences and outings. A purely social event, so if immediately after this, you all wanted to go grab dinner together, you could do that. You would have to self-govern yourselves in that event, though, and make sure that you weren't talking about CAC business. It would have to be a purely social outing. There are also exceptions for ceremonial gatherings. The basic requirements for a meeting to comply with the Brown Act, one, you as a body can only discuss items that are on the agenda. So you may have noticed if you have ever been in a meeting where one of the legislative body begins veering off topic, they get steered back onto topic. That is because it is a legal requirement. The items that you can take action on are only those that have been presented in the agenda as an action item. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense from the public's perspective, because if you are a member of the public and you are interested in something, you may be more inclined to go to the meeting if you know that action will be taken on it. If it's just an informational item, you may say, all right, well, I already know how I feel about it. I'll wait until a vote is happening before I show up. So that's a really important one. The agendas have to be up 72 hours before the actual meeting. There are some exceptions for emergencies and special meetings. And then the meetings have to be open to the public. As you all know, I think San Francisco is really good about accepting a lot of public comment. The community members here are great at being engaged. So I think this is probably all very, very familiar to you. The final thing that I'll note on the Brown Act is the intersection between the Brown Act and social media. So the Brown Act does not prohibit members of a legislative body from engaging in social media and communicating with your constituents on social media. What you cannot do is communicate with your fellow board members over social media, which includes liking, hearting, adding emoticons. The purpose of putting that restriction into the Brown Act is that a communication over social media can blossom into a meeting as defined by the Brown Act very, very quickly if you have different members of the body communicating in comments and telegraphing that they like or don't like something. So if you see your fellow CAC member communicate on social media, you should not reply in that forum. However, if you have your own social media page and members of the community are engaging with you directly, you can engage with those constituents. And with that, that's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Just very quickly, I'll just say I worked in government at various levels for over 40 years, and in all that time, I accepted one gift, and that was a necktie from someone that was visiting from Sweden. And so I've been very, very careful, and I know the rules pretty well. I'll just also say it's hard to take all this very seriously given what's going on in Washington, but I know it's important to hear this information for everyone.
Thank you for sharing that.
Any questions from members?
I just wanted to super triple check. When we're talking about gifts, it's from like other people, right? Like my partner, if he gives me something, it's fine because we're not acting in the social. It's different, right? Just making sure.
The law does recognize that there are personal relationships within which the other person is not attempting to improperly influence you. So you should feel free to accept gifts from your partner. Yeah, unless your partner is a vendor to the TA, in which case I would suggest we talk.
No, he's a software engineer that likes to bike.
Okay.
Okay, great. Well, if there are no other questions or comments from members, thank you so much for the presentation and for bearing with us and our little schedule changes at the very end there. Appreciate your flexibility.
Of course.
Thanks so much.
All right, my pleasure. All right, thank you so much, everybody.
Should you check for public comment on this real quick?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Is there public comment on this item in the room? Doesn't look like there's any. Is there any remote public comment on this item?
There is no remote public comment.
Great, thank you so much. Let's move on to item 11, introduction of new business. This is an information item. Do any CAC members have any new business? Member Levine?
Yes, a couple of things. Before my hiatus for months, I had requested information, data on injury accidents involving bicycles and e-bikes and scooters, and I don't know if that information was ever, in the time I was gone, had ever been compiled and disseminated. But if it has, I'd like to see it. Secondly, about 10 days ago, I had what was potentially a horrific incident where I was going on a hike over by Land's End, and a bicyclist was coming down from the Legion of Honor, and there was a car waiting at a stop sign, and I was turning. I was on my motorcycle, and I was turning, and a bicyclist came through 25, 30 miles an hour around the car, missed me by maybe 2 inches. Both would have been killed. I have no doubt about it. But it really rattled me for several days. I guess that's all preface to what I'd really like follow up to that data I mentioned before, is I'd like to see data compiled either through the police logs or through General Hospital or whoever, indicating not only injury accidents involving those forms of transportation, but also at-fault responsibilities. And I'd greatly appreciate that information. Thank you.
Member Ortega?
Hi, yeah, I'd like to ask for, it feels a little silly to do this, but I really would like SFMTA to come back regarding the Valencia bike lane, because it's now getting torn up so that all the bicycles that used to have protected lanes are now in the middle of the street. Illegal left turns are starting to happen again, and I feel like all of the safety and concerns that we had about that intersection has just kind of crumbled as we rebuild this bike lane again in 3 years. So I feel like the thing I'd really like is a retrospective on how to avoid spending millions and millions of dollars for arguably something that I think is getting to be a laughing stock in this city. And I would just really love to understand again how we got here and why this is what we have. And I feel like we're talking about deficits and budget money, and it's just really unfortunate to see what was a bike lane no longer existing for thousands of commuters.
Member Ng?
Just a random question, sorry if this is stupid, but I guess we could follow up on this separately, but I just had questions around the Prop L funds and what they're specifically used for, I guess, because I wasn't here when that was voted on, and why, like, that's used for certain things, I guess, for certain projects, but that can't be allocated towards SFMTA to cover their budget deficit?
Member Margarita?
Thank you, Chair. Just 2 items. I wanted to see if we can get a report back from SFMTA regarding why they're looking at cutting back on the 14 Mission bus line, which is very heavily populated, from First Street all the way to top of the hill. So looking at the reasoning behind that. And 2, just to make a comment, I know that it's off the table, but it should have never been on the table. I hope it doesn't get on the table again. It's a reflection of our society when we're looking at setting crossing guards, that are close to public and private schools. We need to take care of our communities, children, the elderly, and I'm just really glad it's off the table. I hope it stays off the table, but that's just a really sad state, and I was furious to even hear that it was even on the table to begin with. So I hope it doesn't get back on the table again, but what does it say about our society if we're not prioritizing the most vulnerable, marginalized populations, including children and the elderly? So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
If there's no other new business from members, we can take public comment if there's any in the room on this new business. Not seeing any. Operators, is there any remote public comment on new business?
There is no public comment.
Great, then we can move on to public comment. This is general public comment on items under the Transportation Authority, CAC's purview that are not otherwise agendized at this meeting. Is there any public comment in the room?
Yes, thank you, Edward Mason. I'd like to provide 2 instances within the last week where we had congestion, and it was caused by the commuter buses. There was one commuter bus at 24th and Castro that took out a fender on a truck that was parked in front of the Bank of America because they were doing some remodeling after hours about 7 o'clock. And that's the email that I sent to you with the photos of it, indicating that disruption occurred. There was a lady that was trying to get out of her parking spot on Castro Street, and she was prevented from getting out because the commuter bus was parked around the corner. And this week, I received an email from Muni saying that there was a reroute at 24th and Castro. And then the subsequent email came out saying, oh, well, the commuter bus is now being towed from the intersection because evidently it broke down. And the point is that the commuter buses are kind of empty, but maybe the ridership is coming back. But, you know, if you're going to live here, work there, then take Caltrain down to wherever you did. You know, I did it 45 years ago when I took a position in San Jose. I took Caltrain, or then it was Southern Pacific from 3rd and Townsend in those days. So it can be done. And lastly, there's just a proliferation of micromobility. And I would certainly recommend that there be consideration of providing license tags, or, you know, a tag on the bicycle. I'll tell you, getting run down and everything.
Thank you for your comment.
And that's the conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you. Operator, is there any remote public comment?
There is no remote public comment.
Great, public comment is closed. That puts us on item 13, which is adjournment. Thank you all. Meeting is now adjourned.